Momentum is growing for a ban on sports betting advertising during broadcasted games. This is in a bid to crack down just a little bit on gambling. Opposition leader Peter Dutton did float the measure in his budget reply speech last week, and it's since received pretty widespread support. Joining me live is independent MP Andrew Wilkie. This is right in your wheelhouse, Andrew Wilkie. Welcome to the program. Good idea?
G'day, Laura. It's a great idea. I applauded it when I heard it on last Thursday night. It just makes sense, and I think it's in accordance with the public's expectations that we don't have our sports broadcasts just, topped and tailed and covered with gambling advertising, particularly when it's a time that a lot of kids are watching the game. So good on Peter Dutton. It's good as far as it goes, and it will complement the work that the government is also doing on looking to ban credit cards for online gambling. So these are all really positive steps. Of course, they're still only the first steps. I'd like to see the government go further. Probably the elephant in the room is actually linking all of the Australian companies in real time so that when a gambler reaches their daily limit on one app, rather than just swiping to the next app, they're actually locked out of gambling online for the rest of the day.
Yeah, okay, that is something that certainly wouldn't be beyond getting done, but would certainly need a little bit more reform in this area. We talk about this at a federal level because Peter Dutton, frankly, has put it on the table, but what many people might not know is that this very much comes down to state jurisdictions, doesn't it?
Not with online gambling, Laura. Because of the federal government's authority over telecommunications and the internet, this is actually firmly within the federal government's jurisdiction, not to be confused with poker machines, which have historically been within the jurisdiction of the state and territory governments. Although, interestingly, when I had a deal with Julia Gillard in my first term between 2010 and 2013 for national poker machine reform, when the government at the time looked into it, they realised that they had levers like the laws around the Corporations Act, taxation laws. The feds actually have a number of levers to intervene in all forms of gambling nationally if they choose to, but probably it's most straightforward when it comes to online and sports betting, where the federal government has all the authority it needs. It certainly has the authority over the banking system as well. So hence Michelle Rowland made her announcement about looking to ban credit cards or the use of credit cards for online gambling. And Peter Dutton's quite right. The federal government can control at least the technical advertising. When it comes to, say, signs at grounds and the signage for sports companies on players' uniforms, that would, there might be other ways to tackle that.
Okay, one final question on this, because gambling isn't illegal, nor should it be, and there's a great social aspect to it. Do you recognise that? And kind of what is your perfect world of gambling advertising? And not all types of gambling, I would say, are created equal either.
Well, that's right. Look, I might surprise some viewers by actually pointing out I'm not anti-gambling. I'm actually pro-harm minimisation. So the challenge for governments and policymakers is to make all forms of gambling as safe as they possibly can be. Now, table games at a casino, the lotto, bingo, all those sorts of things, they have a very low rate of gambling addiction. But when it comes to poker machines and online and sports betting, they're the two forms of gambling that are most problematic, have the highest rate of gambling addiction. So whether it's, say, having a cashless pre-commitment card for poker machines where you can enforce daily limits, or whether it's reducing the advertising on sports betting and linking the apps in real time so daily limits are enforced across someone's suite of gambling companies they're subscribed to. These are ways that still allow everyday gamblers to have fun, to lose what they can afford. I don't object to that, but they are ways of effectively reducing the chance of someone becoming a gambling addict. And if they are a gambling addict, a way of somehow controlling their behaviour so they limit the amount of harm they can do to their lives and their loved ones around them.
Okay, well, this is not entirely linked, but we're going to talk about that stadium in Hobart. We see the only Liberal leader in the country now in a bit of trouble over his support for it. Give us some perspective. What is so wrong with building this stadium in Hobart?
Laura, this is hugely controversial down here. And in fact, on Saturday, there were thousands attended a rally outside State Parliament House, many thousands protesting against it. In essence, we have a proposal here for a stadium that most Tasmanians, they don't need, they don't want, and they can't afford. We've already got two good AFL stadiums in Tasmania. We've got UTAS Stadium in Launceston, we've got Bunston on the Eastern Shore here in Hobart. At both of those stadiums, we already play AFL games, and they are very, very rarely filled to capacity. But despite all of that, we have on the table a proposal for a stadium which the government says will cost a little over $700 million. The engineers I talk to say by the time you put a roof on it, it'll be well over $1 billion. That would be the third stadium in a state of a little over 500,000 people. So you can see why people are saying, well, what's going on here? Why on earth would we spend so much money when we have so many more pressing problems to address? It really beggars belief. And I think it really goes to really quite bullying behaviour by the AFL, who somewhere along the line sort of plucked out of nowhere this a precondition for us getting an AFL team is that we had to have a third stadium. The second in Hobart, which incidentally will only have 3,000 more seats than the other stadium, which is within eyesight across the river.
Right, so you think the AFL, Gil McLachlan has basically bullied the state government there?
Oh, absolutely. The AFL have said if you don't build a third stadium, you won't get a licence for a team. I mean, I would characterise that as bullying behaviour, and I lament the fact that the state government has rolled over, and I lament the fact that the federal government, for reasons I find unfathomable, is prepared to tip in $65 million to upgrade the Launceston Stadium and $240 million toward the cost of this third stadium, the second stadium in Hobart. I don't know what Albo's thinking there. I tell you what.
Why can't you do both, Andrew Wilkie? Why can't you do both? Because, I mean, on that logic, if the Sydney Opera House was being proposed to be built today, it probably never would have been built. I note there was objection when the new Adelaide Oval was built. Now, South Australia has just had this hugely successful gather round in the AFL. Yes, they're unpopular when you first start to build them, but essentially they become massive community assets, don't they?
Well, you gave the example of the Sydney Opera House. What's being proposed in Hobart right now would be like building a second Sydney Opera House across the harbour at Kirribilli.
It is delightful. We could have two.
well, that's what's been proposed down here. Look, Bunston Arena has 20,000 seats. It's a lovely venue. You can play Aussie rules there. You can play cricket. The Ashes have had a test there, and that's just across the river on the eastern shore. What the government's proposing is building another stadium on the western shore of the Derwent River, within eyesight of the other stadium, and it probably won't have a roof because the budget that's on the table isn't enough for a roof, and it will only have 3,000 more seats. I mean, everyone in Hobart is just shaking their head, thinking, what are some of these politicians smoking when they think this is a good idea, and that it's a good idea to do it right now when Tasmania has a health and housing crisis, and think it's a good idea to do it at Macquarie Point. I mean, this is the largest brownfield site in any Australian capital city. It's a priceless bit of real estate, and they want to shove a footy field on top of it.
Okay, well, it sounds like it is not the end of that particular issue. Andrew Wilkie, thanks for your time on the program this morning.
Thanks so much, Laura.